Chapter 4. Vagabond, 1933. 1. The new setting. Franklin Roosevelt had been elected President of the United States in 1932, and with him came many new reforms. New hope sprang up for those poverty-stricken by the Depression. Relief agencies were instituted to provide needed work for millions. Construction projects were set in motion, and new highways were to be built. How forceful a role this new hope played in my parents' minds could only be related by them. I'm sure much thought and prayer went into the final decision before Dad went into debt to buy a dump truck and headed north to Cameron, Arizona, to work on road construction. It must have been in the fall of 1933 that we moved from Uncle Pete's house on the farm to a house on the other side of Mesa near Mother's folks. The house belonged to Uncle Wheeler, who had moved to a gold mining camp named Octave. The house was on a 3 to 5 acre lot adjacent to Grandfather Horn's. Wheeler's house was about 500 yards from Grandfather Horn's. The house was small but adequate. My bed was located on a screened porch with canvas sidings to keep out the cold winter breeze. I believe Virginia shared this area too, at least when Dad was home. We saw little of Dad during the 2 ensuing winters, for his work was some 200 miles to the north, which was a great distance to travel in those days. His only means of transportation would have been the truck or a ride with some friend going his way. The old Franklin car we brought from the farm stood parked behind the house. I seem to remember it needing repair and Dad working on it from time to time during his visits home. My joy of leaving milking cows behind was short-lived, because on Uncle Wheeler's place there was one cow that had to be milked morning and night. This, at least, was a great improvement over the previous conditions, and it also provided the much-needed milk for the family. We had very little money even with Dad's new job, and Mother was forced to make most of the clothes we wore. The only thing she didn't make were my shoes and trousers. I believe Mother even made the coat we wore. I remember Virginia begging Mother to the point of tears for store-bought clothes. Even food seemed to be in short supply in our household then. Concerned for our health, Mother fed us fruit for breakfast and insisted on regular morning exercises. Just outside the back door was a deep pit that Wheeler had dug for a future basement addition to the house. It was beside this pit, every winter morning, that we had our morning class of exercises. We didn't appreciate the activity then, but I'm sure it served us well. Sis and I attended the Franklin Elementary School during the next 2 years while living at Wheeler's. The school bus stopped in front of the Horn house for the kids living within a quarter-mile radius of this stop. Sometimes we were fortunate to get a ride to school with Aunt Leota, who taught art at Franklin. Leota owned a Graham Page car that I remember well, and years later drove. Virginia attended 7th and 8th grades at Franklin, and I attended the 5th and 6th. 2. Williams, Arizona. The old Nile Theater was located at the corner of Main Street and Central. 10 cents admitted kids to the Saturday afternoon matinee. The dime was usually obtained by selling a dozen eggs to the Chinaman's grocery store located on the corner of the Mesa-Chandler Highway and the Old County Road. The 1.5-mile walk to town took us through a number of fruit orchards and grape vineyards. The unripened fruit often left its telling marks in the pit of our stomachs. I had just turned 10 years of age when school closed for summer vacation in 1934. Virginia was midway through her 11th year. Mother had turned 33 in March, and Dad was 36, just 1 year younger than I am while writing this story. The summer vacation in 1934 was a glorious one. When school dismissed, we packed the old Franklin, having been repaired, and headed north to spend the summer with Dad. The car was fully loaded as we departed. In addition to the family, Mother, Virginia, and Dean, we also took Aunt Vera and cousin Grant Allen, Aunt Nora's next eldest son. Mother was committed to do all of the driving, which took most of 2 days. I may be wrong here, as the memory of our arrival is very vague. We may well have traveled the 1 day and part of the night. The old Franklin had an air-cooled engine and traveled along in the hot daytime sun without mishap. A good share of the distance was an uphill grade, but the car never overheated. Although we traveled slower than most other cars on the road, we were able to keep a good pace with them, as we did not have to make frequent stops to let the engine cool, as did most other cars. Other cars would whiz by us on the highway, but we would always pass them at the next service station, letting their engines cool off. It was a pleasant game we played. We met Dad in Williams, Arizona, where we stayed for some weeks. Our home was a small cottage nestled in the pines. The cottage was one of a group of such as motels are today. It was situated at the foot of Bill Williams Mountain on the west side of the town. The owner of the cottages encouraged his guests to leave with him a memento of their visit by either carving or drawing a picture on a piece of pine wood. My contribution was a colored picture of Donald Duck or Mickey Mouse, I can't remember which. The drawing was held in high esteem for a boy of 10. It was here that I learned to play rummy, a card game popular even today. The game was generally played with 2 teenage boys who also stayed at the camp. Although I unconsciously displayed my cards to them, I seemed to be a perpetual winner. With these same 2 boys, I went for a hike one day up Bill Williams Mountain. It was said to have bear and mountain lions roaming its slopes, and children should not wander too far into its thickets alone. We had a grand time at first, but soon became hopelessly lost and decided our only hope was to try to reach the Ranger Tower located on the very top of the mountain. We reached the Ranger's Tower just as darkness fell. Knowing that our parents must be alarmed at our long absence, the Ranger telephoned to town and sent word to all of our parents. We then departed with the Ranger down a road on the east slope which led into town and our waiting parents. Whether repercussions occurred on our reunion or not, I don't remember. We made no further attempts, however, to hike into the dense thickets of the mountain again. It was here, also, that I found a few pieces of colorful petrified wood, some of which I still possess to this day. 3. Cameron, Arizona, 1934. It was late June 1934 when we departed Williams. Dad's work moved to a new road construction area near Cameron. We made camp near the Little Colorado River. It was a bleak desert scene broken only by the deep gash of the river. The hot desert sun poured its burning rays into the dust-ridden camp. There were no clouds to shield the blazing rays or settle the stifling dust. The only water was in the depths of the canyon, thousands of feet below. Still, it was home for a while, and the family was together. The clear, cloudless nights were commanded by the moon and stars. We walked through the moonlight nights onto the narrow bridge over the deep slash of Mother Earth, cut by centuries of flowing water, wending its way to the southward Gulf Sea. July 4th brought the joy of exploding fireworks, and under the moonlit sky, sparklers and firecrackers were lighted and dropped from the bridge into the black depths of the echoing canyon. And so summer passed and the long trek home began. I believe that Dad drove us home to Mesa and then returned to continue his work. The new school year started Virginia in her last year of elementary school, and I in the 6th year of mine. With it, too, came a new family crisis. In late 1934 or early 1935, while Dad was on one of his short visits with us at home, the finance company repossessed the dump truck, and with it all of Dad's tools. It was a bleak day in our lives. Dad was without work and the family without support. It was possibly an act of providence that the events occurred as they did, for a new life was about to begin. 4. The new home. A home is no more than one makes of a house. Our house in Mesa had been a home, a comfortable one, and we had enjoyed the many family ties. The Salt River Valley had been settled by Pews and Horns in the late 1800s, and I was of the 4th generation. We were within yelling distance of Mother's parents, and it was comforting to have them near with Dad away most of the time. The old Horn farm also provided a wonderful playground with rusting farm machinery. In one of the chicken yards, a large hole had been dug, for what purpose I know not. Over the dugout had been fashioned a roof of old lumber, gunny sacks, and dirt. Many games were played inside that adventurous cave. Of the many memories of those days, there is one I shall not forget. Here, in this little house of Wheeler's, I received my last real lickin' from Dad. Virginia and I had a fight over something, and it ended in quite a brawl. I remember well the injustice I felt when the responsibility for all that had happened fell on me. On Dad's return home that day, I was whipped with a rope. The burning memories of that day often return after I have misjudged one of my own children. I know how they must feel. The sting of the rope was nothing compared to the ache in my heart. It is unfortunate that punishment is generally an act of anger rather than an act of correction. During the short time we lived on Uncle Wheeler's place, I became good friends with Aunt Nora Allen's family. Grant and Elwood were probably my closest pals, even though they were older by several years. In the late spring of 1935, Dad had found work at the Octave Gold Mine, 100 miles or so north. With the closing of school, we said goodbye to all the familiar sights and faces, and journeyed once again into the valley of the unknown.